On the afternoon of November 29, 1970, a professor from the University of Bergen took his two daughters hiking in a place called Isdal. The name translates to Ice Valley. It's at about 10 kilometers south of Bergen, Norway's second largest city. The terrain is rocky. The trails wind through steep, uneven ground. In late November, the air is cold. The light fades early. At some point during their hike, the professor and his daughters notice smoke. Not the smoke of a campfire. Not fresh. Something older. Residual. They followed it. What they found, positioned against a large rock in a clearing, was the body of a woman. She had been partially burned. The burns were concentrated on her face, chest, and neck. Severe enough that visual identification would not be possible. Near the body were two bottles. Empty. They had contained petrol. Scattered around the scene were the remnants of documents. Passports. Also burned. The woman was still wearing jewelry. A wristwatch. Rings. Her clothing remained largely intact, but every label had been removed. There was no wallet, no identification, no keys. The professor contacted the authorities. Police arrived within hours. The body was transported to Haukeland University Hospital in Bergen. An autopsy was conducted the following day, November 30th. The pathologist's findings were documented in detail. Female, age estimated between 25 and 40 years. Height approximately 164 centimeters. Short, dark hair. The cause of death was determined to be carbon monoxide poisoning from smoke inhalation. Contributing to the death was an overdose of phenobarbital, a sedative. 12 sleeping tablets were found in her stomach. They were partially dissolved. The fingerprints on both hands had been filed off. This had been done after death. No identification was found on the body or at the scene. 2 days later, staff at the Bergen railway station came forward. They had seen a newspaper description of the case. They recognized it. A woman matching that description had left 2 suitcases in the station's luggage storage on November 23rd, 6 days before her body was found. The suitcases were retrieved. Inside, investigators found wigs. Multiple wigs in different colors and styles. Clothing, with every manufacturer label carefully removed. Foreign currency in small denominations from several countries. Prescription eyeglasses with no identifying information. A spoon, later found to carry a partial fingerprint that matched the deceased. And handwritten notes. Pages of them, written in a code that no one has deciphered. Police began checking hotel registries across southern Norway. They found her, or rather, they found records of her. Between March and November of 1970, 8 months, she had stayed at hotels in Bergen, Oslo, Stavanger, and Trondheim. She used at least 8 different names. The names were similar to one another, but never identical. The addresses she provided were false. The nationalities she claimed varied. She paid in cash. She changed hotels frequently. Sometimes she stayed only one night. Witnesses at the hotels described her as polite, reserved, well-dressed. She spoke several languages: German, French, English. Her accent, they said, seemed to change. At 2 hotels, she was seen with a man, middle-aged, well-dressed, unremarkable in appearance. He was never identified. He never came forward. The last confirmed sighting of the woman was on November 23rd in Bergen. The same day, she left the suitcases at the railway station. After that, there are no confirmed sightings. No hotel records. No witnesses. Until November 29th. In early 1971, the Bergen police closed the case. Their conclusion was that the death was most likely suicide. The reasoning was straightforward. She had ingested sleeping pills. She had used petrol as an accelerant. She had burned identification documents. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of restraint, no indication that another person had been involved. To the investigators, the evidence suggested a woman who had not wanted to be found. Not in life, not in death. Her body was buried in a cemetery in Bergen. The coffin was made of zinc to preserve the remains in case future identification became possible. The case was filed. That was 1971. 50 years later, no one knows who she was. To understand how this case unfolded and how it was investigated, it helps to understand where and when it happened. Norway, in 1970, was a member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. It had joined in 1949, one of the alliance's 12 founding members. Geographically, Norway occupies the northwestern edge of Europe. It shares a land border with Sweden to the east, Finland to the northeast, and, critically, the Soviet Union in the far north. A short border, less than 200 kilometers, but strategically significant. Norway's coastline stretches for thousands of kilometers along the North Atlantic. During the Cold War, this meant Norway sat at the intersection of Western military interests and Soviet proximity. It was aligned with the West, but it shared geography with the East. Bergen is Norway's second-largest city. It sits on the country's western coast, facing the North Sea. Historically, it has been one of Northern Europe's most important ports. Trade, shipping, and maritime activity have defined the city for centuries. In 1970, Bergen had a population of roughly 200,000 people. It was a working city, industrial, connected by sea to the rest of Europe and beyond. The Cold War, by 1970, had been ongoing for more than 2 decades. It was not a war in the conventional sense. There were no major battlefields in Europe, no front lines, but intelligence work was constant, pervasive, conducted across borders, in capitals and port cities, by multiple governments. Intelligence activities during this period were, by necessity, quiet. They involved travel, documentation, meetings in hotels, railway stations, cafes. The work was human, face-to-face, analog. Officers and agents moved between cities using trains and commercial flights. They carried currency from different countries. They stayed in hotels under names that were sometimes real, sometimes not. They met contacts in public places that offered both visibility and anonymity. This was routine. Hotels were common sites for these meetings. They offered privacy within public spaces. A person could check in, meet someone briefly, and check out without attracting attention. Railway stations served a similar function. Neutral ground, high traffic, easy to blend in. Multiple countries operated intelligence networks in Norway during this time, not just NATO members and the Soviet Union. Neutral countries also maintained operations. Intelligence work was not confined to adversaries. Allies gathered information on each other. This was understood, expected. Norway, as a NATO member with a Soviet border, was a location of interest. None of this is speculation. This is documented history. Declassified records, memoirs from former intelligence officers, and academic research on Cold War operations confirm this operational landscape. The purpose of stating this is not to suggest what happened in the case of the Isdal Woman. The purpose is to describe the environment in which the case occurred. In November of 1970, a woman traveling under multiple false identities, moving between cities, maintaining operational security, and carrying coded notes would not have seemed extraordinary to anyone familiar with intelligence work. It would have seemed familiar. Whether that is what she was doing, whether she was involved in intelligence activities, is unknown. No intelligence agency has ever acknowledged her. No government has claimed her. No definitive evidence has connected her to any intelligence service. But the pattern of her behavior, the tradecraft, as it's called, matched what was routine for that time and place. This does not answer the question of who she was. It simply establishes what was normal in 1970 in a city like Bergen. The body was discovered on November 29, 1970, in Isdal Valley, approximately 10 kilometers south of Bergen. The location was remote, accessible by hiking trail, but not heavily traveled, particularly in late November. At the scene, police documented the following: 2 empty bottles. Analysis confirmed they had contained petrol. Partially burned documents. The remnants were identified as passports. Enough remained to determine they were false documents, but not enough to identify the holder. Jewelry. A wristwatch, brand name St. Moritz. Several rings, all still on the body. Clothing, largely intact, despite the burns. Every manufacturer label had been removed. No wallet, no identification cards, no keys, no purse. The body was transported to Haukeland University Hospital in Bergen. The autopsy was conducted on November 30th by the hospital's pathology department. The official findings were recorded as follows. Female, age estimated between 25 and 40 years. Height approximately 164 centimeters. Short dark hair. The hair color may have been dyed, based on other evidence recovered later. The body showed severe burns to the face, chest, and neck. The burns were consistent with the use of an accelerant. The cause of death was determined to be carbon monoxide poisoning. This occurs when smoke is inhaled. The carbon monoxide displaces oxygen in the bloodstream. Contributing to the death was the presence of phenobarbital in the system. Phenobarbital is a sedative. It was commonly sold under the brand name Phenomel in Europe during this period. 12 sleeping tablets were found in the stomach. They were partially dissolved, indicating they had been ingested shortly before death. The pathologist noted an additional detail. The fingerprints on both hands had been removed. This had been done after death. The removal was deliberate and thorough. Dental records were examined. The dental work suggested the woman may have originated from Central or Eastern Europe. The specific techniques used were common in those regions during the 1950s and 60s. However, no match was found in any national dental registry. The body could not be visually identified due to the severity of the burns. No identification was present at the scene or on the body. The investigation at this point had a body, a cause of death, physical evidence, but no identity. That changed 2 days later. On November 30th, staff members at Bergen railway station contacted the police. They had read about the case in local newspapers. The description matched someone they remembered. A woman had come to the station on November 23rd, 6 days before the body was found. She had deposited 2 suitcases in the station's luggage storage facility. She had paid the storage fee and left. She had not returned to collect them. The police retrieved the suitcases. Inside, they found the following items. Several wigs, different styles, different colors, black, brown, auburn, clothing, well made. Each item had been carefully examined. Every manufacturer label had been cut out, not torn, cut, deliberately. Foreign currency, small denominations, from multiple countries, Norwegian kroner, German marks, British pounds, other currencies, a pair of prescription eyeglasses. There were no identifying marks. No optician's label, no prescription details. A silver spoon. It carried a partial fingerprint. The print was later matched to the deceased. This confirmed the suitcases belonged to her. Handwritten notes. Multiple pages. The notes contained combinations of letters and numbers. They appeared to be structured, organized, not random. The notes have never been deciphered. No key or cipher has been found. Cryptographers have examined them. No consensus has been reached on their meaning or purpose. A small notebook. It contained what appeared to be schedules or meeting times. Some entries were annotated in German. The suitcases also contained cosmetics, toiletries, and other personal items. All were generic. None carried identifying information. The discovery of the suitcases was significant. It confirmed that the woman had been in Bergen on November 23rd. It showed she had planned ahead. She had stored her belongings intentionally. But it raised another question. Where had she been between November 23rd and November 29th? There were no hotel records for those 6 days. No witnesses came forward. No confirmed sightings. The police began searching for earlier records of her movements. Investigators examined hotel registries across southern Norway. They found her, not by name, by pattern. Between March and November of 1970, she had stayed at hotels in 4 cities: Bergen, Oslo, Stavanger, and Trondheim. The registries showed at least 8 different names. The names were not random. They were variations, similar in structure and sound, but never identical. Fenella Lorch, Alexia Zarnamerches, Vera Jarl, Fenella Lorch. Other names were recorded, but some records were later lost when portions of the case file were destroyed in 1987 during routine archival procedures. The registration information she provided varied between stays. Different addresses, different nationalities, different dates of birth. None of the information checked out. The addresses did not exist. The nationalities did not match her appearance or accent, according to witnesses. At every hotel, she paid in cash. No credit cards, no checks, cash only. She changed hotels frequently. In some cities, she stayed at multiple hotels within the span of a few days. Sometimes she stayed only one night before moving to another location. Hotel staff who remembered her provided similar descriptions. She was polite, reserved, well-dressed. She spoke multiple languages. German was noted most frequently, also French and English. Some staff members reported her accent seemed to change, though they could not specify how. She did not engage in extended conversation. She checked in, stayed briefly, and checked out. She did not draw attention to herself, but she also did not socialize. At 2 hotels, staff members reported seeing her with a man. The descriptions were consistent. Middle-aged, well-dressed, polite but unremarkable. He did not stay at the hotels. He met with her briefly, then left. No name was recorded for this individual. No staff member asked for identification. There was no reason to. He was a visitor, not a guest. Police attempted to identify him. They issued descriptions to the public. No one came forward. He was never identified. The last confirmed sighting of the woman was on November 23rd in Bergen. She was seen at or near the railway station. This aligns with the timing of the suitcase deposit. After that, there are no confirmed sightings. No additional hotel stays were recorded. No one reported seeing her between November 23rd and November 29th. 6 days. She had been traveling openly, using hotels, moving between cities for 8 months. Then, for 6 days, there is no record of her presence anywhere. On November 29th, her body was found in Isdal Valley. In early 1971, the Bergen police completed their investigation. The official determination was that the death was likely suicide. The conclusion was based on several factors documented in the case file. First, the presence of sleeping tablets. 12 phenomenal tablets had been found in the woman's stomach during the autopsy. The tablets contained phenobarbital, a sedative. The quantity was significant. It suggested intentional ingestion rather than therapeutic use. Second, the use of an accelerant. 2 bottles that had contained petrol were found at the scene. The burns on the body were consistent with the use of an accelerant. The positioning of the body and the distribution of the burns suggested self-infliction. Third, the destruction of identification documents. The passports found at the scene had been burned. This was interpreted as a deliberate act to prevent identification. Fourth, the absence of signs indicating the involvement of another party. There are no defensive wounds on the body, no evidence of struggle, no marks suggesting restraint or force, no footprints or physical evidence indicating another person had been present at the scene. Fifth, the overall context. The woman had been traveling under false identities. She had removed labels from her clothing. She had left her belongings in storage. To investigators, this suggested someone who intended to disappear. The coroner's report supported the conclusion. The cause of death was confirmed as carbon monoxide poisoning from smoke inhalation, with phenobarbital as a contributing factor. The medical evidence was consistent with suicide. The investigation found no evidence to suggest homicide. No suspect was identified. No motive for murder was established. No witness reported seeing anyone else in the area on November 29th. Based on these factors, the Bergen police closed the case. The body was buried in a cemetery in Bergen. A zinc coffin was used. Zinc does not corrode. It preserves remains over long periods. The decision to use zinc was made to allow for the possibility of future identification. If new methods became available, or if someone came forward, the body could be exhumed and examined. The grave was initially unmarked. Later, a simple marker was placed. It read, Isdal the Isdal Woman. The case file was archived. No further investigative action was scheduled. The conclusion was documented and filed. It became part of the official record. The case remained closed for 45 years. The official conclusion addressed the manner of death. It determined how the woman died. Carbon monoxide poisoning, contributed by an overdose of sleeping tablets. The evidence supported this finding. What the conclusion did not address was a different question. Why had she been traveling the way she had? The travel pattern was not brief. It spanned 8 months, from March to November of 1970. During that time, she stayed at hotels in at least 4 cities: Bergen, Oslo, Stavanger, Trondheim. She used at least 8 different names, possibly more. Some records were lost when portions of the case file were destroyed in 1987. The names were not random. They were variations, similar in structure. Fenella Lorch, Fenella Lork, Alexia Zarnamerches, Vera Jarl. They followed a pattern, deliberate variation, not arbitrary selection. At every hotel, she provided false information, false addresses, false nationalities. The details changed with each registration, but the approach remained consistent. She paid exclusively in cash. No credit cards, no checks, cash only. This was consistent across all documented stays. She changed hotels frequently. Sometimes she stayed at a location for only one night before moving to another. Even within the same city, she would check out of one hotel and check into another nearby. The clothing found in her suitcases had been altered. Every manufacturer label had been removed. Not torn off, cut out, carefully, methodically. This had been done in advance, not impulsively. The wigs found in the suitcases suggested she changed her appearance. Different colors, different styles. This was not casual. It was preparation. The coded notes found in her belongings were structured. They were not frantic or disorganized. They appeared to be records, documentation of some kind. They have never been deciphered, but their organization suggests purpose. This was not the behavior of someone in a brief crisis. This was sustained behavior, maintained over 8 months, across multiple cities, with consistency and planning. The investigation file contains detailed documentation of this behavior. Hotel records, witness statements, evidence inventories. The pattern is clear in the record. What the file does not contain is an explanation. There is no documented working theory about why she traveled this way. No analysis of the operational pattern. No hypothesis regarding the purpose of the false identities, the cash payments, the hotel changes, the removed labels, the coded notes. The focus of the investigation was on the death itself, the physical evidence at the scene, the autopsy findings, the immediate circumstances of November 29th. The 8 months of travel beforehand were documented, recorded, but not explained. The question of why someone would maintain this level of operational security over such a long period was not addressed in the official conclusion. It is possible the investigators considered this question privately. It is possible they had theories they did not document. It is also possible they viewed the behavior as consistent with someone planning to end their life and simply did not pursue it further. The file does not say. What the file shows is this. A woman traveled under false identities for 8 months. She maintained operational discipline. She avoided leaving traces. She carried coded notes. She was seen with an unidentified man on at least 2 occasions. And then, on November 29th, she was found dead in a remote valley. The conclusion was suicide. The behavior pattern was noted, but left unexplained. The documented behavior allows for analysis, not of motive, not of identity, but of pattern and capability. What the case file shows is a series of actions sustained over 8 months. First, the maintenance of multiple false identities. She used at least 8 different names, possibly more. The names were not random. They were variations on similar themes. This suggests deliberate construction rather than improvisation. Each name was used consistently at specific locations. She did not confuse them. She did not slip between identities in a way that attracted attention. This requires memory, discipline, planning. Second, the avoidance of extended personal interaction while not attracting undue attention. Witnesses described her as polite and reserved. She checked into hotels. She paid. She stayed briefly. She checked out. She spoke when necessary, but did not engage in conversation beyond what was required. This is a specific skill. To remain unremarkable. To be present but not memorable. To interact without creating connections. It suggests training or significant experience in environments where this behavior is necessary. Third, the strategic and regular changing of locations. She did not stay in one place. She moved frequently, sometimes after only one night. Even within the same city, she would change hotels rather than extend her stay. This behavior reduces the likelihood of recognition. It prevents familiarity. It makes surveillance more difficult. It is a technique used in operational security. Fourth, the removal of identifying information from personal items in advance. Every clothing label was cut out, not torn, cut carefully. This was done before she traveled. The items in her suitcases had already been altered by the time she checked them into storage on November 23rd. This is preparation. It is not something done impulsively. It requires forethought and time. Fifth, the maintenance of coded written records. The notes found in her suitcases were structured. They were organized. They appear to be records of some kind, though their exact content is unknown. The presence of coded notes suggests two things. First, that she was documenting something she considered important. Second, that she did not want others to understand it if the notes were found. This is intentional information control. Sixth, the repeated meetings with at least one other individual. She was seen with a man on at least 2 occasions at 2 different hotels. The descriptions matched. This suggests either the same person or someone fitting a consistent profile. He visited her briefly, then left. He did not stay at the hotels. This suggests coordination, contact, communication with someone outside the documented travel pattern. These 6 behaviors, taken together, form a profile. It is not a profile of identity. It is a profile of capability. The behavior demonstrates sustained operational discipline, consistency, planning, the ability to maintain false identities over an extended period, the ability to move without leaving unnecessary traces, the ability to document activities in a way that protects information. Several possible contexts could explain this behavior. One possibility is professional training in operational security. Intelligence agencies, both state and private, train personnel in these techniques. The behavior is consistent with that training. However, no intelligence agency has ever acknowledged her. No government has claimed her. This remains speculation. Another possibility is flight from a threatening situation. Someone fleeing an abusive relationship, criminal organization, or other danger might adopt similar methods. The operational security would serve as protection. However, no missing persons report was filed. No one came forward to identify her. If she was fleeing, she succeeded in disappearing entirely. A third possibility is participation in an organized activity requiring discretion. This could be legal or illegal. Espionage, smuggling, covert political work, corporate intelligence gathering. Any number of activities where maintaining secrecy is essential. The evidence is consistent with this, but no evidence definitively establishes it. A fourth possibility is a psychological condition involving identity concealment. Dissociative disorders, paranoia, or other mental health conditions can lead to sustained efforts to hide or alter one's identity. The behavior would reflect a perceived need for protection, whether or not an actual threat existed. However, the consistency and planning involved do not align with the disorganization often associated with severe psychological distress. Each of these explanations is possible. None is proven. What the available evidence does not support is spontaneity. The behavior was not impulsive. It was not erratic. It was sustained, consistent, and deliberate. This leads to a single conclusion that can be stated with confidence. The maintenance of operational security over 8 months requires either training, significant motivation, or both. Someone who maintains false identities, avoids leaving traces, documents activities in code, and meets contacts discreetly is either skilled in these methods or driven by circumstances that demand them. In either case, this is not casual behavior. It is purposeful. What that purpose was, the case file does not establish. The behavior is documented. The capability is demonstrated. The motive remains unknown. The 1971 investigation was thorough in certain areas. The autopsy was detailed. The physical evidence at the scene was documented. Hotel records were searched across southern Norway. Witnesses were interviewed, but there were elements that were not pursued. This is not unusual. Every investigation has limits. Resources are finite. Priorities must be set. Decisions are made about which lines of inquiry to follow and which to set aside. In this case, several elements were noted but not explored further. First, the identity of the man seen with her at hotels. Witnesses at two separate locations reported seeing her with a man. The descriptions were consistent. Middle-aged, well-dressed, unremarkable in appearance. No sketch was produced. No detailed follow-up interviews were conducted to develop a more specific description. No appeal was made to the public to identify this individual. He remains unidentified in the case file. Second, professional cryptanalysis of the coded notes. The notes found in her suitcases were documented. They were photographed. They were included in the evidence inventory. But there is no indication in the case file that they were sent to professional cryptographers for analysis. No record of consultation with experts in codes or ciphers. No documented attempt to determine whether the notes were a simple personal code or something more complex. The notes were preserved, but they were not deciphered. Third, coordination with intelligence agencies regarding operational patterns. The behavior, false identities, frequent location changes, coded notes, meetings with an unidentified contact, matches patterns associated with intelligence work. There is no indication in the case file that intelligence agencies were consulted. No record of contact with Norwegian intelligence services or foreign agencies. No documented inquiry into whether the pattern matched any known operations or personnel. This does not mean such contact did not occur. Intelligence consultations are often not recorded in public case files, but no documentation exists in the available record. Fourth, international missing persons databases. The investigation checked Norwegian missing persons reports. None matched. There is no documentation of systematic checks with international databases. No record of coordination with Interpol. No indication that dental records or physical descriptions were circulated to foreign law enforcement agencies beyond initial inquiries. The search for her identity remained primarily domestic in scope. Fifth, the mechanism and timing of fingerprint removal. The autopsy noted that fingerprints had been removed from both hands. This was done after death. The case file does not contain analysis of when this occurred, whether it was done at the scene or elsewhere, whether it required tools or could have been done by hand, whether it suggested the involvement of another person or could have been self-inflicted before death. The fact was documented. The implications were not explored. Sixth, the source of the false identification documents. She had been traveling under false names. The passports found at the scene, though burned, were identified as false documents. There is no record in the case file of an investigation into where these documents came from, whether they were professionally produced or crudely forged, whether their origin could be traced, whether they matched known forgery patterns from criminal organizations or state actors. The documents were noted. Their source was not pursued. Seventh, follow up on dental records beyond initial comparison. The dental work suggested Central or Eastern European origin. The techniques used were common in those regions during the 1950s and 60s. There is no indication that dental records were systematically compared with records from multiple countries. No evidence of extended outreach to foreign dental associations or registries. The analysis stopped at the initial observation. In 1987, 16 years after the case was closed, routine archival procedures at the Bergen police resulted in the destruction of portions of the case file. This was not unusual. Archives have limited space. Closed cases are periodically reviewed. Materials deemed non-essential are destroyed to make room for active investigations. As a result, some hotel records were lost. Certain witness statements were not preserved in their original form. Details that might have provided additional context are no longer available. Physical evidence was retained. Photographs were preserved. Court documents remain. But the file is incomplete. The case file shows no documented contact with foreign law enforcement agencies beyond initial inquiries. No documented contact with intelligence services. No coordination with international organizations. The investigation remained local in scope. Bergen police, with support from regional authorities. The focus was on Norwegian records, Norwegian witnesses, Norwegian databases. After the case was closed in early 1971, the file indicates no follow-up actions, no periodic reviews, no re-examination as new investigative techniques became available, no systematic effort to revisit the case unless new evidence emerged. For 45 years, the case remained closed. This was standard procedure. Closed cases do not typically receive ongoing attention unless there is a specific reason to reopen them. New evidence, a credible tip, public pressure, technological advancement that might resolve outstanding questions. In this case, none of those factors were present until 2016. The elements that were not explored in 1971 were not pursued due to negligence or incompetence. They were not pursued because the investigation had reached a conclusion. The death was ruled a likely suicide. The immediate circumstances were documented. The case was closed. What was not explored reflects the scope and priorities of a local investigation in 1971. Not the limits of what could have been explored, but what was determined to be necessary at the time. The file remains incomplete, but it reflects the decisions that were made. 1971 to 2016, 45 years. During that time, the case remained closed. The file sat in the Bergen police archives. The woman remained buried in a cemetery in Bergen, in an unmarked grave later given a simple marker, Isdal, the Isdal Woman. For 45 years, several things did not happen. No family came forward to identify her. No one filed a missing persons report that matched her description. No one claimed her as a daughter, a sister, a wife, a friend. No intelligence agency, in Norway or elsewhere, released information connecting her to any known operation or personnel. No government acknowledged her. No declassified documents mention her. No foreign government requested information about the case. No international inquiry was made. No diplomatic channel was open to pursue identification. She remained unidentified. This silence is significant, but it is not necessarily mysterious. There are reasons why a case like this can remain closed for decades. First, the classification of the death as suicide discouraged continued inquiry. Suicide is a conclusion. It answers the question of how someone died. In investigative terms, it resolves the case. There is no suspect to pursue, no criminal to apprehend, no ongoing threat to public safety. Once a death is classified as suicide, institutional resources move to active cases. Unsolved homicides, missing persons, crimes with identifiable victims and potential suspects. This is not neglect. It is allocation. Police departments operate with finite resources. Time, personnel, budget, priorities must be set. A closed suicide case does not typically receive ongoing attention unless there is new evidence or a specific reason to revisit it. Second, there was no identified victim. When someone dies and their identity is known, their family has standing to pursue answers, to request further investigation, to challenge conclusions, to keep public attention on the case. In this case, there was no family. No one knew who she was. No one could advocate for her. No one had the personal connection that drives sustained inquiry. This is not uncommon in cases involving unidentified individuals. Without a family, without a name, a case can fade into archives more easily. Third, institutional systems are designed to handle active cases, not historical ones. Closed cases are archived. They are preserved in case new information emerges, but they are not actively reviewed. Detectives work on current investigations. Resources go where they are most needed in the present. This is standard procedure. It is how law enforcement systems function in every country. Closed cases generally remain closed unless one of several things happens. New evidence is discovered. A witness comes forward. Technological advances make reanalysis possible. Public pressure or media attention creates momentum for reopening. For 45 years, none of those factors were present in this case. Then, in 2016, something changed. Public interest in the case had been growing, particularly in Norway. True crime enthusiasts, amateur investigators, and journalists had begun examining the case. Articles were written. Discussions took place online. Questions were raised. Why had the case been closed so quickly? Why had certain avenues not been explored? Could modern forensic techniques provide answers? This public interest created pressure. Not dramatic pressure, not scandal, but sustained, thoughtful inquiry from people who believed the case deserved another look. In October of 2016, the decision was made to exhume the body. The exhumation was conducted carefully. The zinc coffin had preserved the remains well. Samples were taken: dental material, bone material, materials suitable for modern forensic analysis. Isotope analysis was conducted. Isotope analysis examines the chemical composition of teeth and bones. Different regions have different isotopic signatures based on water sources, diet, and environmental factors. These signatures are absorbed into the body during childhood and adolescence. The results suggested the woman likely originated in Central or Western Europe, possibly Germany, possibly France, possibly Belgium, or border regions between these countries. This narrowed the geographic possibilities, but it did not provide an identity. DNA was successfully extracted from the remains. The DNA profile was entered into national databases, then international databases. Interpol, European law enforcement networks, genetic genealogy databases. No matches were found. No familial connections were identified. The DNA exists. It is available for comparison. But as of now, it has not led to identification. In 2017, the Bergen police officially reopened the case. The status changed from closed to active. The case was assigned to investigators. Modern techniques were applied. The evidence was re-examined. Public appeals were made. Media coverage increased. The BBC produced a podcast. Norwegian broadcasters aired documentaries. The case received international attention. Tips came in. Theories were proposed. Investigators followed leads. None resulted in identification. The case is currently open. It is classified as an active cold case. But there are no active leads. The woman remains unidentified. The reopening of the case was not a response to investigative failure in 1971. It was a response to capability. Forensic science has advanced significantly since 1971. Isotope analysis did not exist as a practical tool then. DNA profiling was not available. Genetic genealogy was decades away. The reopening reflected the fact that tools now exist that did not exist before. Tools that might provide answers. So far, they have not. The silence continues. Not because of institutional failure. Not because of cover-up or conspiracy. But because no one knows who she was. And no one has come forward to claim her. If this case occurred today, the investigation would look different. Not because the 1971 investigation was inadequate, but because the tools available to investigators have changed significantly. In 1971, forensic science was limited by the technology of the time. DNA profiling did not exist. The first DNA-based identification would not occur until 1986, 15 years later. Isotope analysis was a research technique, not a practical investigative tool. International databases were paper-based and difficult to search systematically. Today, those limitations no longer apply. Expanded DNA databases now exist in most developed countries. National databases, international databases, public genetic genealogy platforms where millions of people have voluntarily submitted their DNA for ancestry research. When an unidentified body is found today, DNA is extracted and run through these systems as standard procedure, not just to match the individual directly, but to identify distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins, connections that can be traced backward through family trees to establish identity. This technique, called genetic genealogy, has solved cases that were closed for decades. Unidentified remains, cold case homicides, missing persons, is now routine in cases like this. International law enforcement cooperation has also changed. In 1971, coordination between countries was slow. It required formal requests through diplomatic channels. Information sharing was limited by bureaucracy and, in some cases, Cold War political divisions. Today, systems like Interpol's databases allow real-time information sharing across borders. European law enforcement agencies have established protocols for cooperation. Missing persons, unidentified remains, and criminal investigations are routinely coordinated internationally. Advanced cryptanalysis tools are now available. The coded notes found in the suitcases would be analyzed by professional cryptographers. Not just government agencies, but academic researchers and private consultants who specialize in historical codes and ciphers. Computational tools can test thousands of decryption methods quickly. Whether this would successfully decipher the notes is uncertain, but the effort would be made systematically. Digital record cross-referencing has transformed investigative work. Hotel registries, travel records, financial transactions. Most of this information is now digital and searchable. Patterns can be identified across large data sets. Connections that would take weeks to trace manually can be found in minutes. And consultation with intelligence communities on operational patterns is now more routine. When investigators encounter behavior that suggests tradecraft, false identities, operational security, coded communications, it is standard practice to consult with intelligence agencies, not to involve them in the investigation necessarily, but to determine whether the pattern matches known activities. This does not always produce results. Intelligence agencies may not acknowledge operations, even historical ones, but the consultation occurs. If this case happened today, the investigative approach would likely include all of these elements from the beginning. Immediate international coordination, contact with multiple countries' missing persons databases, intelligence community consultation, genetic genealogy pursued aggressively, professional cryptographic analysis, extended investigation before any decision to close the case. The investigation would be broader in scope. More resources would be allocated. The timeline would be longer. But would it solve the case? Since 2016, modern techniques have been applied to this case. DNA has been extracted and analyzed. It has been entered into national and international databases. It has been made available for genetic genealogy searches. No familial matches have been identified. Isotope analysis has been conducted. It suggested the woman likely originated in Central or Western Europe, Germany, France, Belgium, or border regions. This narrowed the geographic possibilities, but it did not provide a specific identity. Media coverage has increased significantly. The case has been featured in podcasts, documentaries, articles. Public awareness is higher now than at any point since 1970. No one has come forward with information that has led to identification. The coded notes have been examined again. They have been shared more widely. Cryptographers and amateur codebreakers have attempted to decipher them. They remain undeciphered. Modern investigative tools are powerful. They have solved cases that seemed unsolvable, but they are not magic. They require data to work with. DNA databases only help if a relative has submitted their DNA. Isotope analysis only narrows geography. It does not provide a name. Media coverage only works if someone recognizes the information. Codes can only be broken if a pattern exists that can be identified. In this case, the modern tools have been applied. They have provided some information. Regional origin, DNA profile, increased attention, but they have not answered the central question. Who is she? The observation is this. Improved investigative tools have expanded what is possible. They have solved many cases, but they have not yet resolved this one. Not because the tools are inadequate, but because the information needed to make the connections, a relative in a database, a recognizable pattern in the code, a witness with knowledge, is not present, or has not been found yet. The case remains open. The investigation continues. Modern techniques remain available, but the woman remains unidentified. 54 years after her body was discovered, certain questions remain unanswered. Her legal name is unknown. The names she used, Fenella Lorch, Alexia Zarnamerches Verijarl, were false. Her actual name, the one given to her at birth, has never been established. Her nationality is unknown. Isotope analysis suggests Central or Western Europe, possibly Germany, possibly France. possibly Belgium or regions near those borders. But this is regional probability, not confirmed origin. Her nationality remains undetermined. The purpose of her travel through Norway is unknown. She moved between cities for 8 months. She maintained operational security. She met with at least one contact. But why she was there, what she was doing, is not established in any record. The identity of the individual seen with her at hotels is unknown. Witnesses described him middle-aged, well-dressed, unremarkable, but his name was never learned. His connection to her was never explained. He never came forward. He remains unidentified. The content and purpose of the coded notes are unknown. The notes exist. They are preserved. They have been examined, but they have not been deciphered. What they say, why they were written, is not known. Why no missing persons report was filed in any jurisdiction is unknown. She disappeared from somewhere. Someone knew her before November 1970, yet no family reported her missing. No employer, no friend, no government. The absence of a missing persons report is itself a mystery. The circumstances of the 6 days between November 23rd and November 29th are unknown. Her last confirmed sighting was November 23rd at the Bergen railway station. Her body was found November 29th. Where she was during those 6 days, what she did, who she may have seen, is not documented. Who removed the fingerprints and when is unknown. The autopsy noted the fingerprints had been removed after death. But the mechanism, the timing, whether this was self-inflicted before death or done by another person afterward, is not determined. These are the questions that remain. But there is also evidence. Information that is known. A DNA profile exists. It was extracted in 2016. It has been entered into national and international databases. It is available for comparison. To date, it has produced no matches, but exists. If a familial connection appears in a database, identification becomes possible. Isotope analysis has been completed. It indicates probable origins in Central or Western Europe. This is not precise, but it is informative. It narrows the geographic scope. Physical evidence has been preserved. The items from the suitcases, the jewelry, the wigs, the clothing with removed labels, the coded notes, the spoon with her fingerprint. These items still exist. They can be re-examined as new techniques become available. The coded notes, though unbroken, are preserved. If new cryptographic methods are developed, or if context is discovered that provide the key, they can be analyzed again. Partial hotel records remain. Not all records survive the 1987 archival destruction, but some did. They document her movements, her aliases, her pattern of behavior. Witness statements are on file. Hotel staff, railway employees, the professor and his daughters who found her body. Their accounts are documented. They provide context, even if they do not provide identity. The case file is active. The investigation is open. Resources can be allocated. Tips can be followed. New information can be pursued. What the evidence shows is clear. She engaged in systematic preparation over an extended period. This was not impulsive. This was planned. The removal of labels, the use of false identities, the coded notes, the wigs, the operational discipline maintained for 8 months. All of this required planning and execution. She successfully concealed her identity. 54 years later, despite modern forensic techniques, despite DNA analysis, despite international databases, despite public attention, she remains unidentified. Whatever steps she took to prevent identification, they worked. The official conclusion, reached in 1971, determined how she died. Carbon monoxide poisoning, contributed by an overdose of sleeping tablets. The physical evidence supported this. The medical findings were consistent. The manner of death was documented. But the official conclusion did not determine who she was. It did not establish her name, her nationality, her purpose. It did not explain why she traveled the way she did, why she maintained operational security, why no one reported her missing. It did not answer why she was in Norway. The case is unresolved, not in the sense that the investigation failed, but in the sense that the central questions remain open. The evidence exists. The tools are available. The case file is active, but the answers are not there. She remains buried in Bergen. The cemetery is quiet, well-maintained. Trees line the pathways. In winter, the ground is cold. In summer, flowers grow. Her grave is marked now. A simple stone. It reads, Isdal the Isdal Woman. Not a name, a place, a description, an acknowledgement that she is known, but not identified. The grave is tended. People leave flowers occasionally. Visitors who have heard the story. Researchers. Those who remember, even if they never knew her. Isdal Valley is still there. 10 kilometers south of Bergen. Hikers still walk the trails. The terrain is still rocky, still remote. The valley is quiet, peaceful. It is a place where someone was found, but is not defined by that. It remains what it was. A valley, a landscape, a part of Norway. The case file remains open. At the Bergen police headquarters, the investigation is classified as active. The evidence is preserved. The DNA profile is in databases. Tips are still received. Leads are still followed when they emerge. The file will remain open until the woman is identified, or until there is no longer institutional capacity to maintain it. For now, it is active. The question of identity remains unanswered. 54 years of effort. Investigators in 1971. Forensic scientists in 2016. Journalists. Researchers. Members of the public who care about unsolved cases. All have worked to answer the question. The question persists. This is not unusual. In some investigations, resolution does not arrive. Not because the work was inadequate, not because the effort was insufficient, but because the information necessary to resolve the question is not available or has not yet been found. Some cases are solved decades after they occur. New evidence emerges. A witness comes forward. A technological advance makes something possible that was not possible before. Other cases remain open. The files are maintained. The evidence is preserved. The possibility of resolution exists, but the resolution itself does not come. This case represents one such investigation. The evidence is documented. The tools are available. The question is clear, but the answer is not there. She was someone. She had a name, a family, a life before November 1970. Somewhere, that information exists. In records that have not been found. In memories that have not been shared. In connections that have not been made. But for now, she is Isdal, the woman from Isdal, and the case remains open. This case remains unresolved after 54 years of investigation. If this documentary raised questions for you, we invite you to share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. What aspects of the evidence stood out to you? What investigative approaches might warrant further consideration? Please remember, this case involved a real person whose identity remains unknown, and investigators who have worked diligently across decades. Respectful discussion honors everyone involved. If you found this examination worthwhile, subscribing to Unresolved Years helps us continue producing in-depth documentaries on cases that took years to understand or remain unresolved.